Namaste and welcome to React Bits. Today we are going to build a quiz application with Flutter and Appwrite. So let us get started. First, we'll start by creating a Appwrite project in our Appwrite console. If you do not have one, you can easily get started and load it locally. So if you want to learn more about how to get started with Appwrite, you can follow along with my Appwrite introductory tutorial as well as visit appwrite.io. The links are provided in the description below. Okay, let us create a Appwrite project. Let's call it Quizy app. Let's create it. We have our app. Now we need to create a database to hold our quiz questions. So let me create a collection called questions. I'll name it questions. And then I'll add a few rules here. So first one is question. This is text and this should be required. Options. This is text again, but this should be required and array. Finally, the correct answer. This should be text. Again, this is required. Okay. Permission, read access. Anyone can read. Write access. For now, let's say role member. So anyone who has signed up can write for now. Save. We now have our collection. We can add new database, add as many questions as we like using this interface. However, I'm keen with automating. So I have a JSON collection of questions, and using Dart and Appwrite server-side SDK, I will load questions into this collections. So let me open up a Visual Studio Code here, and I'll start by creating a new Flutter project. New application project. We'll call it Quizy. It's creating our brand new project. So let me copy my JSON file that I have for questions. Let me hide the browser. Here I have list of questions. Let me zoom in. Okay. So I have few questions regarding Flutter and computing in general. So I'd like to use this JSON file, load it and load the questions from the JSON file and save it to our Appwrite collection. So I'll be using this same project. Here I'll add the dependency for now. .appwrite, any version should be fine. Okay. So let me create a script. So I'll call it load questions.dart. Let me import .appwrite. Now I'll create a client. Set endpoint. We can get our endpoint from our project. So let's go to home, settings. So this is the project ID and this is the endpoint. Let me copy. So let's set endpoint. This is project ID. This is endpoint. and set project. So this is project, and then finally set key. So as this being a server side SDK, we need to set up key. So let's generate a key. API keys, add a key. For now, I'll just give all permission. So create, I have a key, I can show it, and I can use it here. So I have set up the endpoint, project, and the key. Now all I need to do is I need to load this JSON file and then load it to a server. Now let us load the questions from the file first. So let me create file. Let me import from .io. So file should be imported from .io, not .html. File quiz app questions.json, and then questions equal JSON decode. We import it from .convert. Source will be our JSON dot read as a string. We can use sync method. So now we have the list of questions. Let us create new instance of DB, Appwrite DB. Database DB equals, we pass in the client instance. Now we'll use it. Create document. So we need to pass collection ID. Then our data will be our question, and read permission will be asterisk, write permission array member. But to do this, this question is a list of array. So let us loop through the questions. Questions dot for each question, and let's copy this inside. We can create the instance, this instance outside the loop. Okay, now we need a collection ID. Again, we can get it from our project. So if we go to database, questions collection, and settings, we find the collection ID. We just copy it and we paste the collection ID here. Our data is question, not questions, this individual question that we want to write. Okay, and let us await this. Let's make this async await. So here just print each question as they are added, but for each doesn't handle async properly. So let me try. For question in questions, and here we can use this instead of for each, so that we can await, as our main function is already async. Now we can simply run this script using the dart command from our terminal. So let's try it. Dart load questions. Let's see if it prints. See, it's printing the question. I think it's added. Let's check our database. Let's go to documents. Let's refresh. We should see our questions, options, everything. So if we go here, yes, no. See, we have our questions loaded. Now we'll move on to building our Flutter application with our quiz. Not to worry, I will include the load questions and quiz question JSON file as well with this repository, so you don't have to write it again. You can easily run this script with Dart. Just replace your endpoint, project, key, and all the collection ID, these things. So let me just remove the key bits from here so that GitHub doesn't warn me. You can change your own endpoint, project, key, and then collection ID in order to make this work. Okay, so this is our initial Flutter project. We have just created it. I will just publish it to GitHub repository. Right now I'll make it private, but not to worry, I'll be publishing it once the tutorial is ready and I publish the tutorial. Okay, let us quickly set up. First, in the main.dart, remove all comments, and in pub/spec, remove all comments. I'll hold Dart Appwrite dependency in the dev dependencies, so you can still use this script, but it is not required under dependencies. Let's remove this. Let's remove these empty lines. Okay, let us add dependency. Appwrite. You might be getting the newer versions when this tutorial is ready. Not to worry, it will work perfectly fine. So let's set up some things. So in place of endpoint and project, please use your own endpoint and your own project. Let's call it Quizzy. I like the red, so let's make it home page. Let's remove this. Let's create home.dart. Let me import home, and for home we just want a center, child, elevated button, child, text, start quiz, on trust. We will be navigating to the new page that will call quiz page. So okay, let's make this stateful, and let's go to home.dart, and in onTrust we'll just return text.push, material page route, builder will be quiz page. Okay, now we have a start button, and when we tap it, we'll be taken to the quiz page. For A's, I'll be building for web, but you can easily run it in Android and iOS as well. So let us see it in action. Okay, on the web, the start button looks a bit small, but that's fine. When we tap it, we go to the quiz page, which is empty right now. So we can set up our quiz page. So let us set up. Skip the title, and here we need to load the questions from our API, right? So let's see. Questions. We need to make our questions modal. So let's make question.dart here question. So let's call it ID string question list string options answer, and let us generate data class. I'm not yet using null safety, so let me remove this as well as this and this. And ID in the Appwrite, the auto generated ID is $ID. So let me change this. So everything else should be fine. We should have our question modal. Next, let us import this here. Let's create a function called load questions async. So wait, we need to create client, so we'll import from Appwrite. You can see this Appwrite. We can set the endpoint right here, constants endpoint. Okay, and then set project app constants dot project database db client. We now have db. So here dot list document collection id. Again, we need collection id. So constants, I think this is the collection id. Let me check here. So this is our project. Okay, then collection will be this. So here collection id will be constants dot collection. We don't want to pass any filters. We can simply get this, and then this rest will have data field. Data. So rest.data will consist of list of questions. Map okay. We can map the JSON data into a question model or question object. and that we save in our questions list. Let's set up few things. We can also use try catch here. On Appwrite exception, catch E. For now, we'll just print print the error in the console. Now we'll set up few things like loading. So initially loading true. Here first we'll set loading true, initially loading false. Let's call load questions. Don't need this. So here page of set state loading true, and here finally loading false. We don't need to use this here. So here in the body, if loading is true, we'll show circular progress indicator. Otherwise, we'll check questions not equal to null and question is not empty, then we'll show the list view. Otherwise, we'll show check console just for us. And list view, let us use builder. So instead of list view, we'll be using page view because we want user to view one question at a time. So let us use page view dot builder item count will be questions dot length. Item builder will be let's return a simple container, and here we'll show question dot question. So if we now go to start page, it's loading. Okay, we might have some error. Let's see. Not sure. Some error. Please check console. Let us check console. Debug console. Okay, we have an error. Expected value of a string dynamic, map entry dynamic, but cut one of type dynamic question. Let's see. Okay, this might be okay, I understand. So if we check at the output, let's go to our quiz.dart. Here this should be, I think, documents, if not docs. Let's check. Okay, list dynamic, that's great. So it is correct. We need to from, instead of to list, we can simply use this, and we can remove this to list. Now if we start, it should display the first question. Okay, we have some basic setup here. Now we need to set up things like next question, previous questions, and selecting the answer, showing the score, those kind of stuff. Let's do one more thing here. Let's shuffle the question. Okay. Let us create some state variables where we'll save the user selected answers. Zero. So in the bottom navigator, let's add bottom app bar, keep it 60, elevated button on pressed, child, previous. Let's set up few things here, few more things. Equals to 0. Controller, let's create base controller as well. Underscore controller. Base controller, and then on page changed, you can simply set state current page equals the selected index, and here we can simply do controller dot jump to page -1. Now we can duplicate this and have next button page +1. We need to check page is greater than 0 if current page is less than question.length, and we need to hide this. So questions not equal to null is not empty, then we show this, otherwise we show null. We don't show bottom navigation bar at all. Okay, we have basic setup. Let's see if it works. So question is loaded. Can we go to previous? Yes. Next. Okay, we can go through all the questions. We can even simply disable. So on pressed, we can just check current page greater than, less than, or equal to 0, then null, otherwise enable this, and we don't need this check here. And same here, is greater than or equal to length, then null, otherwise. Okay, now if we start, so previous is disabled, that's fine. If we go next, previous is enabled. If we get to the end, okay, oh, I think it starts from 0, so it should be -1. So if I go to the get to the last, we can now scroll through questions. Now all that left is for us to display the options, allow them to select one, and then finally show the score. Let's show the list of options here. So in the children, group value will be answers question.id unchanged set state answers id equals opt, and we need to make this answers into map. Okay, once it is selected, we don't want the user to be able to change, so here underscore answers id not equal to null, then we don't want to allow changing, otherwise we want to allow changing. Let's see how does it look. Okay, in the radio list style value text, again opt our option. Okay, once selected, we do not allow selecting. That's great. And our score should be visible somewhere at the top. So here, instead of this, I'll use another column and I'll wrap this with expanded $score, and on changed we should see if opt equals dot answer, then score plus plus, we want to increase the score, let's say by 5. We need to display the score. Let's style it or let's call it score. Let's give this a padding. Okay, let's see how it looks. Score is 0. Okay, great. Next, dot, next, apple, Steve, great. Let's give it a wrong answer. It remains same. I'm just randomly answering. Okay, so when we are at the end of the quiz, we need to be able to submit the quiz and end the quiz. So let's create a submit button. So instead of this, if this equals So length -1, then I'll show a different button. Let me make a duplicate. So here, if this is the end, it should have submit. On press should have different option. Okay, so if I now start, if I get to the end, I should have submit button. All right. So while we submit, we can send the answers and questions to another page and display the score in nice format. Or let's call it done. Will simply pop when it's done. So let us start the quiz. I can answer. It's correct. Flutter wave, yes, it's stable from Flutter 2.0. Now I can simply hit done and get back. Again, start the quiz. So this is very basic implementation of Appwrite quiz using Flutter. Thank you everyone for watching this tutorial. See you again in the next episode.